ranking the top 10 best comic book movie villains of all time. At number 10, I have Tom Hardy as Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. I feel like this is a very overlooked performance because a lot of people out there kind of hate on The Dark Knight Rises. I still think it's a good movie and he's a great villain in it. Tom Hardy just brings such a threatening presence to this role, and I love how he's a physical match for Batman too. He can easily take him in a fight. Plus you get moments like that opening scene with him on the plane is just so memorable. In the middle of the movie, he literally completely physically and mentally destroys the Batman. At number 9, I have Ultron from Age of Ultron. James Spader as the voice of this character was just such an incredible voice. Like, every line delivery is so good, and he has so many great memorable quotes in this movie. And I really just love so much about this character. First of all, he's just an amazing threat to the Avengers, but I also love that he was created by Tony Stark, essentially. Plus, it will always be hilarious how he looks at the internet for literally 5 seconds and decides that everything in the world needs to just be destroyed pretty much. But I think my favorite moment from Ultron in the movie is actually him at the end talking to Vision. This is just such a powerful scene. At number 8, I have Loki. Now, I know everybody sees him now as kind of an anti-hero or even a hero because of the Loki series, but let's not forget how in phase 1 he was an amazing villain and truly menacing as his character, especially in that first Avengers movie that honestly some of the humor and stuff doesn't hold up as well. Tom Hiddleston's performance as Loki in that film still holds up and makes it an incredible film to rewatch to this day. I also love how unhinged and crazy he is in this first Avengers movie. Like, yes, he is calculated at the same time, but he's also a wild card, which makes him such a good villain. And then the Thor movie, he kind of becomes more of an anti-hero, but he's also a villain in this film too, and that's what makes the character so interesting, that you never really know what side he's gonna be on. At number 7, I have Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow in Batman Begins. Cillian Murphy is one of my favorite actors of all time, and seeing him as a villain in this movie, even though he's not really the main one, him being the side villain, he still kind of just steals the show. There's really just so much I love about this version of the character in Batman Begins and how Christopher Nolan decided to portray him. I love how he's kind of like a horror villain with the gas and the visions he's giving different people. Those are some of the coolest sequences in the entire trilogy. I also love the complete switch up in character from when he's being his doctor persona versus when he's actually being the Scarecrow. Like, Cillian Murphy just absolutely nails this role, and I love that they brought him back in very minor roles in the later films because he's just so good. At number 7, we have Jack Nicholson as the Joker in that first Batman movie. His entire dynamic with Michael Keaton and how they're complete opposites of each other is what makes that movie so good. He is just so amazing as his character. We've seen so many versions of the Joker now, and even by the time this movie came out with different comics and animated things. But I love how this kind of dives into the more mobster side of the Joker while also having him actually be legitimately funny in this movie too, because that is obviously a huge part of the character. And we really have this Batman movie and Jack Nicholson's performance as the Joker in it to thank for a lot of the modern day superhero films. This just completely changed the genre and showed what could be done. At number 5 is the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. We were building up to this character for so long, since the very beginning of the MCU, and it seemed impossible for him to live up to the hype and actually be this big of an Avengers level threat. But not only was he living up to the hype, he absolutely surpassed it and gave us one of the best villain performances of all time. Obviously, I have to give massive props to Josh Brolin as the voice of this character because his voice is just bone chilling in this, and also the writing for giving him incredible lines. He's probably one of the most quotable villains of all time, if not the most quotable. I also just love a villain that has cool powers, and Thanos being one of the most powerful beings we've ever seen in Infinity War is just so badass and gives us some incredible fight scenes, and him coming back in Endgame is almost even better. If you told me when we first saw Thanos in a post-credit scene that some giant purple CGI creature was going to end up being one of the best MCU villains, I would have never believed you. I thought it was going to look dumb, but it looks incredible and the performance was great. At number 4, I have Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. Now, Spider-Man 2 is one of the greatest superhero movies of all time, and a large part of why it is so good is because of this villain. Obviously, Alfred Molina is incredible as his character, and I love how it's really not him that's being the villain, it's just because the chip kind of took over. I also really love a lot of the action sequences. They're just so creative and cool, with a lot of the things of him climbing up the building, fighting Spider-Man, and some of the horror sequences, like when he first wakes up in the hospital. That is genuinely an almost terrifying sequence, but it's amazing. Incredible as he is as the bad guy in this film, there's nothing I love more than a great villain redemption, and he has one of the greatest redemptions of all time at the end of Spider-Man 2. I'm a sucker for some nostalgia. Seeing him and Tobey again in No Way Home, it just hits so hard. Number 3, we're going back to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. This time with the first film, we got Green Goblin played by Willem Dafoe. This is one of the most unhinged character performances I've ever seen in a movie, and it is absolutely brilliant. It feels so perfectly comic booky and cartoony, but at the same time also being a great threat to Spider-Man in this film. And while I love a lot of the new villains that we're getting nowadays that are way more complicated and have a lot more depth to them, sometimes you just want someone that goes absolutely insane and loses their mind, and that's what Green Goblin gives me, and it's a perfect example of it. Plus, Willem Dafoe walks back almost 20 years later into Spider-Man No Way Home, becomes the villain of that movie, gives us some of the best fight scenes of him versus Tom Holland Spider-Man in the hotel scene. kills Aunt May and literally is the best and most threatening part of that film. It is just absolutely incredible that he can walk into this role after 20 years and still be just as good, if not better at it. At number 2 is Heath Ledger as the Joker. Now, I know everybody knows how incredible this role is, but I still gotta gush about it a little bit because it is truly iconic. Not only one of the best villain acting performances of all time, just one of the best acting performances I've ever seen in a movie. It was such a ballsy decision to cast Heath Ledger as his character when he was most known for 10 Things I Hate About You at the time. Like, everybody was completely ridiculing this, and it ended up being one of the greatest villains we've ever seen. Like, he is part of some of the best and most iconic superhero movie scenes of all time. Make sure to let me know in the comments your top 3 favorite superhero movie villains of all time, and hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this. But at number 1, I'm going Ian McKellen as Magneto. He is easily the best part of every one of those X-Men movies he's in. He brings so much just power and gravitas to this role while also perfectly capturing the character and his complex kind of motives. Ian McKellen's also simply just one of the best living actors we have today, and he captures his character perfectly. Plus, I love a good overpowered villain, and Magneto definitely fits that description. He has some of the coolest and most badass powers I've ever seen in my life.